My name is Karim Ainouz. I'm the director of a movie called Praia Do Futuro, which is at Berlinale this year. And the film is the story of two brothers that are kind of separated for a long time and that reunite in Berlin, you know, after a long time of separation. But it's also a love story between two men.
Bonito. Does the place you live in also influence the way you make movies or your artistic work?
Oh, completely. That's probably what influences me. I wouldn't say more, but that's what's really important. And it really starts from the place for me and then to the character. And this movie in particular that's here at Berlinale this year, it's a movie that's a result of a love affair that I had with Berlin and that I have with Berlin, that I have with the place that I was brought up. You know, so the movie really started from the place. The name of the place is the name of the neighborhood that I was brought up in Brazil. So the place is really important.
But in the movie, I had the feeling that the ocean is sort of like the third protagonist in the movie.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. The ocean in the sense that this possibility of crossing that the ocean gives you and this possibility of a horizon that you can go through or franchise, I think certainly it is. And the presence of water, I think it's really important as a character in the movie, you're right, yes. But the ocean, yes, the ocean very much as a place to go and as a place to cross and as a place to bridge you somewhere. It's super important.
But would you say also a place of danger? Because in the beginning someone dies in the water, so...
It's a place of adventure, I think, and that involves danger, that involves life and death, you know. So yeah, I mean, in the beginning of the film there's a character that dies in the ocean, but I think it's the possibility of crossing the ocean that also liberates the characters from the place that they come from. So it was very funny when we started to write this film. There was this first line that we wrote, which was a film about high seas, you know, and I'm not really sure why, but the place where the film takes place in the beginning, it's very much informed by this very violent sea, you know. It's a very violent, the tides are very violent, there's these holes in the water. So we always thought it as a movie, not that would take place in the sea, but that would be triggered by the sea and by the ocean.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I had the feeling that the ocean also has a constructive element because it is the reason that the two main protagonists meet in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's true, and it's also the place that, it's like a border as well. It's like this borderline place. It's not the land, it's the ocean. And it's something which is very much in the element of one of the main characters of the film, his name is Donato. He's a lifeguard and lifesaver. And I think it's almost, whenever there is not ocean, he makes an ocean for himself. You know, when he moves to Berlin in particular, which is a city that doesn't have a sea or an ocean, he's always searching for that element. So I think it's also a very important element in that character, you know.
and then he's working in the, is it the Radisson Blue?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
yeah.
And then he's working in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is also something he complains about in the movie. How can I stay here? The city does not have an ocean. I cannot be here.
Yeah,
and I found that very interesting, how much it is part of his life. But we were already talking about the liberation. I had the feeling that Berlin, for Donato also means to become a free person, to liberate himself.
Yeah.
He changes a lot, but at the same time he also cuts all his contacts to his family back in Brazil.
It is Berlin in the film, but the question here that was interesting to me is maybe it's something quite personal. I feel very at ease in places that I don't belong to, you know? I feel very at ease in places that I don't really understand the language or that I'm a real foreigner in. And so the idea was, yes, Berlin is that place where he comes to and that he kind of becomes someone else, you know, to a certain extent, because, you know, he's still himself, he's still working with water, you know, there's a lot of elements that are still present there, but it is somehow, you know, the name of the film, we decided not to translate it because it's the name of a place, but it's perhaps more Berlin than it is the place he comes from, you know? There's a certain indication of future, of a possible future in Berlin, which I think it's really important for the film and for the character. And it was also important to me to think about a city that had been divided for so many years, that had been cut in half, and how after the fall of the wall, you know, after 25 years, what is it becoming? You know, what's happening and what's happening when these two different systems come together. So there is an indication of future in the city itself that I wanted to play with and I wanted to investigate through the journey of the characters, you know. And so yes, Berlin is maybe the beach of the future, or maybe there is a beach of the future at the end of the film that we're not going to talk about it to disclose it, but I think it's a really important. You know, there is a very dystopic element about the place where the film begins, which is this tropical, sunny, but very salty place. You know, all the salt sort of breaks everything, you know, and it's a place where things don't really grow. You know, it's like a desert, a salted desert, I would say. And I think there is the opposite of this in Berlin. There's kind of an utopian moment in a city which is trying to figure itself out, you know. It's coming from these very strong positions, and what is Berlin today, you know, after 25 years of the fall of the wall, and that's kind of the story of the film as well, you know, because what does become of the city after it's been separated for so long?
You were talking about a lot of things now where I would like to connect.
I really like, whoa,
no,
sorry.
That's fine. The first thing I was thinking was that this process of decaying, which you see in Brazil with the salt in the air.
Yeah.
I had the feeling that you sort of also see that in the scenes in Berlin, because the scenes in Berlin are not scenes of a bright, beautiful, happy city, which Berlin most of the time of the year is not, because of the weather especially, and the light. And I also had the feeling that there you see a dark side of Berlin. It's not this utopian place in contrast to dystopian Brazil, but it's sad in a way, but...
It's very interesting because it can be seen as a gray, sad place, but I think there's something quite beautiful about the gray place. I don't think it's necessarily sad. There's something about the light and the way that the characters travel through light in the city. It's mostly shot in the winter, you know, so it's this kind of filtered light. And I think that is kind of utopian. I mean, there is something quite mysterious about that I really like. I don't think it's sad, you know, I think it's... there's something about the light, now thinking in terms of light and metaphor for the story and so on, there's something about the light in that place where the character of Donato comes from, which is, it's very close to the equator. And I think it's such a harsh light, you know, it's just everywhere, everything, you can see everything. And I think that the way that I was thinking about Berlin is really the kind of place where there's a lot of night scenes, and when it's day, it's a bit like, you know, the light is kind of brought down. It's like dimmed down, you know, in the winter Berlin, the light is really, the sun really never comes up fully. And so I was thinking of it more as a place of mystery than a place of sadness. I think that there's something really, something that you can't really see everything, you know, so there is a certain charm that I think that for the character of Donato was important to put through. There are moments in the film too that, you know, it's shot in this mid-season because there are scenes which are winter scenes, and then you see a possibility of spring and stuff, but the characters really travel through the winter, especially at the end, you know, when the brother arrives and everything. So I think it is a bit, utopian in that sense, in the sense of mystery, in the sense that you don't see everything, in the sense of things can happen. And I think also there is something physically about the two places, which is, it's actually similar, there's a lot of empty space in this beach because of the weather conditions. And in Berlin too, if we look at the film, there's a lot of empty spaces still to be occupied. Sometimes they're parks, sometimes they are like just empty lots and things like that. So that now talking about how kind of similar these places could be as well, But it's interesting you say about the sad of the gray light.
Well, I see your point that it's also mysterious, definitely, especially in the scenes that were shot on the streets when you were following them when they are on their bikes and you have the lights in the fog.
Yeah,
I really like those
yeah.
scenes because you always had the feeling you could lose them. They're somewhere on their way, going somewhere, but you don't really know where because you can't see where they're heading. And there I can really see this mysterious element you were talking about, which I really liked. And that was a point when I watched the movie where I asked myself if it is actually a road movie where you do not see the journey of them, because you do not see how they are on the plane going from one place to another, but at the same time I had the feeling that I'm following someone who is changing a lot by traveling, even though you do not see the travel.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think that you don't see the journey of the travel, right?
Yeah.
But you see the kind of results of the travel and the consequences of it. And the characters, they're always like, there's the first character that travels to Brazil, the second character that travels to Berlin, the third character that comes to Berlin. So it's very much this thing that I was talking about before. What are the consequences of travel and adventure and of changing places and inhabiting places that are not home, So I think it is a road movie in the sense that people are always going away from home, in a sense. Not the German character in the beginning, yes, Konrad, he goes away, but it's a different journey. I think it's a kind of a different nature of journey. But yes, I totally agree. I think that there is something about traveling, and I think the only moment that you see really people in the action of traveling is at the very end of the film. When you don't know where they're going.
No, exactly. Somewhere in the fog.
Yeah.
There was also something else I was thinking about, you just mentioned it. I also had the feeling that Konrad, the German guy, changes in the beginning, but later on we do not follow Konrad anymore, how he changes. He sort of stays the same, but the change rather appears to the people who move to Berlin.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting. I had the feeling that the relationship between Donato and Konrad changes, and that also Ayrton changes definitely because he grows up.
Yeah.
But Konrad himself, I had the feeling, stayed the same after a certain change in the beginning.
Yeah. It totally does. I think that what I wanted to have the film is kind of a triptych because it's about, these huge experiences that the three characters have. And the character of Donato, for me, after, he's back in Germany with the character of Konrad when he's back in Germany with Donato. And for me, it was really important to have a character that was a grounding character and that would actually connect the other characters. So in the beginning, he is going through this horrible trauma, which is losing this friend, and in a way which is very sudden, and then he's completely shaken by it. But throughout the rest of the film, I really wanted this character to be this connecting element, almost like the city, He's almost like Berlin in a way. And so when Donato arrives, when Donato is here, he's the one who kind of triggers the fact that he stays. And when Ayrton comes, because of the impossibility of these two brothers to connect, he's the guy who actually makes the connection. So he kind of stays the same, but at the same time, he's the one who is making possible that these changes with the other characters happen.
Yeah, Ayrton also stays with him in the end.
He
does not stay with his brother, which I found very interesting.
Exactly.
And something you did in the movie was you shot the sex scenes quite explicitly.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. If you compare it to other movies in the festival, I would say they were rather explicitly, because very often you just have the hint that people were in bed together, but you do not really see the act itself. But it's interesting that you say you think so. So you did not see it that way. For you, it was very natural, or?
I think, it's funny. I love sex and I love food and I love a lot of things in life, and I think it's so good to see it, you know. It's so good to see people eating like with pleasure, you know. It's something so sensorial, and sex is something that can give you a lot of pleasure, obviously. So I don't know. I mean, there is no sort of explicit, you know, genitalia. And there's no. So I think for me, it's yeah, maybe it is explicit, but I think that it could be. It could be more explicit. So
Definitely, yeah.
you know, but I think that it was really more the question here of how do you translate affection through sex. And I think you have to show the bodies to be able to convey that, and you have to show the relationship between the bodies and the skin and so on. And so I think that was really important to portray. But I never thought of them like as a sexually explicit.
Okay.
I thought because when you think of sexually explicit, you think of.
Yeah, I see
Do you know what I
mean.
mean?
Yeah.
You actually see the act, and you see the organs, and you see all that. And I think that it's really more of an explicit display of affection than of sex. But yeah, there is scenes where the people are. But you never see full. I mean, you see full body. Yeah, no, you just see full body.
It's more than just suggesting the sex.
It's
definitely.
much more. No, it is. It's an action.
Yeah.
You know, and it's there. Yeah. In that sense, it is very explicit. Yeah.
But on the point of intimacy, I had the feeling other scenes were more intimate. For example, when Donato is sick in Berlin and Clemens Konrad takes care of him.
Yeah.
That is a scene where I had the feeling they're very close and very intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was closer for me than the sex scenes.
Yeah. The sex scenes are very. There's a lot of action in those sex scenes. There's something quite physical that I think was important for me. That, with the exception of one, I think there's one at the end, you know, when they have this fight and Donato disappears and they are back in bed. I think that there is a lot of intimacy in that one, but on the other ones, it's really this kind of animal act, I think, between the characters that also triggers, you know, the affection, and that also triggers, you know, the way that they relate to each other. But I agree. I think that there's also. There's a lot of affection that you can convey, you know. But it was really important for me that those characters, that they connected not through affection in the first moment, but through action, you know, and to kind of de-romanticize a bit this notion of how they got together. I mean, they got together because there's a very strong physical attraction between them, and then things evolved. And also, I think in the beginning there is this. Yeah, I won't talk about it very much because it's disclosing a bit the film, but you know, there is this immediate connection that you have with someone through sex, you know, and a lot of things can happen from there, but I think it's the triggering element for that relationship in particular. And for that, it's important to have something which is sexually explicit in that.
Yeah. But what I found psychologically interesting in that moment was that one is the one who tried to save his life and couldn't save his friend's life, and then they have sex with each other.
Yeah.
That they meet in such an intense moment, and one is the lifeguard and the other one is the one who needed to be rescued. Yeah, on a psychological level, I
it's a messy situation.
Yeah.
I really wanted to have the beginning of the film to see these characters in a very vulnerable situation, because there are these kinds of, you know, one is a motorbiker, he went to the war, and the other one is this high, kind of hero, lifesaver. And I thought it was really important to have these two men connect in a moment of vulnerability, you know, in a moment that they sort of lose their masks. And I thought that should be through a sexual encounter more than anything else. And it is a very messy sexual encounter because there's guilt and there is loss and there is mourning, but there's a lot of violence in the way that they relate to each other sexually. So it was really to throw the characters in a moment of vulnerability and sex as a way to express that, you know. Much more than to express love and the promise of love and romance.
Yeah, this moment of romance, there was one scene which I really liked, which I found very well done, was the scene where Konrad is singing, and he's singing directly into the camera. And it's sort of the feeling that he's singing for the audience who's watching the movie. And in that scene, I had the feeling that he is very at peace with himself, not the mess from the beginning anymore, where
Yeah.
everything was a turmoil.
Yeah.
And there he could open up, like the character really opened itself to the audience and also, well, to his partner in that moment.
Yeah. It's these moments that you're not afraid to be ridiculous, you know, and those are the moments that are the most. I don't know. What's the word in English for that? They're the most enchanting moments of someone. You know, he is singing and Clemens didn't want to sing because he thought he was like, how do you call, going out of tune and stuff. And there is something which is really joyful about that and very shameless. That I think it's perhaps where they really connected, even more when they are having sex afterwards. You know, it's actually that's where they connect. And I wanted the reason that I thought it would be good to not have the presence of the other character on screen. It's precisely because of that, because I think he's really opening up. You know, and I think it would be good to put the audience in the same position as Donato as a way of connecting to that character and fall in love with him. Really.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Definitely.
This kind of mirroring effect, you know, that
And something about Clemens Schick, who plays Conrad, does he speak Portuguese?
No, not one word.
Okay, that is very surprising, because in the movie it really seems he speaks fluent Portuguese.
Yeah. It was a bit of a... I didn't want him to learn Portuguese because I always wanted to keep this noise between them, you know, like they don't really understand each other through language, that they understand each other through other things. And then when we went to shoot, I mean, I realized that it was a bit of a stupid idea because I couldn't really change the dialogues. I was completely frozen, you know, in this situation. And I also wanted him to not have this funny, you know, heavy accent. And so what we did at the end was we actually coached him line by line. And so there's really only one moment in the film where he speaks a lot, and it's incredible what he did. I mean, he seems to speak fluent Portuguese, but he doesn't speak a word of Portuguese. And he never really learned, you know, even after the end of the shoot. So in one way, I think it was a problem because it really... And Wagner didn't speak any German, you know, so...
Seriously?
No, he doesn't understand a word of German.
Okay, you absolutely do not get that when you watch the movie. I thought he would speak German.
Yeah, no, I mean, the idea is that, you know, after being here for 10 years, that he speaks German perfectly. So that's what we wanted to convey. But so in one hand, I think it was a bit of a problem because there was no room for improvisation through dialogue because they couldn't speak. But at the same time, there was an energy that we kept throughout the whole shoot, which is, you know, they communicated off screen, they communicated in English. It's not like the actors didn't communicate to each other, but I thought it was really always very important that the characters never really accessed each other's world through language, but through something else. So in a way, I think it's good that they didn't learn each other's language, but it was tricky.
Yeah, I can imagine. That they accessed each other by other things than language, I thought you could see very well when they were fighting.
Yeah.
Because there it didn't seem to be necessary that they have a common language, but both just spoke their language and understood each other and understood what the problem was.
Yeah.
And there the necessity of speaking a common language was not given, so yeah.
Yeah, and also the wish to kind of make a movie that doesn't rely on the spoken word all the time and that could rely on other things, and also to construct characters and to construct relationships which are more conveyed through the body, you know, and more than psychology or language, which is a way of processing things, you know. So I think it's really important to keep that distance between them, you know, as we're shooting.
Apart from the characters, I also have an aesthetic question.
Yeah.
You had chapters in the movie.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that? Because I had the feeling that it was actually quite clear. You had one thing set in Brazil, the other in Berlin, so you also had the natural cut because of the different places, but still you decided to have those chapters in there.
Listen, I did a lot of things in this film that I have always wanted to do in other films, but I didn't really do them because I didn't think it was appropriate or blah, blah, blah. And I've always thought of this film more as like an epic film, like an adventure novel that you travel to places, and it's not a classic adventure novel, obviously, but that had this sort of literary element that I thought that the movie should have. These characters, they cross the ocean, they go to a different continent, they age, the time passes, there was a scope. All my other films, they kind of take place in a very contained, dramatic time, diegetic time. This is the first time that I throw myself into the adventure of having a movie where a lot happens and there's a bigger scope of time and so on. And I thought that marking the chapters, I've always wanted to do a movie where they had chapters and they had things written on them and everything. And so, and there was also the question of, because I've never really dealt well with time jumps in films or time gaps. And I thought there would be an interesting way to kind of, bridge those gaps, to not throw the viewer immediately into another situation. And so he loses 2 or 3 minutes of film trying to understand where he is or what he's doing. So I thought there was a way, like in books, that you have the chapter, and they have the number of the chapter, and to make that explicit in the film. And there is a certain poetics in the choice of the name of the chapters that I think it's also important for the film. I think it brings a different layer to the film. And those are kind of, ultimately I think there was this Romanesque element that I thought the film should have, and I think the chapters heading kind of help. And those are lines that had been with me since I started to write the script with my co-writer. And it's like the end, there's a lot of voiceover also at the end of the film. And so it's like these small elements that you put in that sometimes maybe you don't need it, but I think on my case, I think it creates a tone for the film, which I think it's important. More than explaining, but I think it sets a tone that I think it's important. And there was also a way to map a movie which is sort of centered on this triangular relationship. So there's these 3 chapters. It's not like every chapter is for a character, but it's a bit like that, So it's also marking or mapping the film through the journey of 3 different characters. So there's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And I was flirting with the possibility of doing epilogue, but I thought, no, let's not do that. That's announcing an ending, so there's no epilogue. But also that was in my mind,
Well, I also had the feeling that you had a lot of little things in there that were sort of adding to the story. For example, that Conrad went to Afghanistan as a soldier, which is not a big debate or anything in the movie, but it's mentioned.
Yeah.
And talking about the chapters, you said they were there, like the lines were with you from the beginning on.
Yeah.
Where did the line come from, a German-speaking ghost?
There was a dialogue line, it was a dialogue. You saw it, the guy says it later. So that last chapter, I didn't know how to, what it should be. We had a few ideas. And then when I read that line, Philipp, my co-writer, that he wrote it, it was so beautiful, because it talked about the 2 brothers at the same time. And then at the end, we decided to go with that. It seemed very precise, to quote that line from the movie. The other 2 chapters, the Drowner's Embrace, was something that I've always wanted to have in the film. I mean, it's in the film visually, but I wanted to kind of have it written. And the other one was very much inspired by the bridge and the wall and the fall of the wall, and the guy, this guy who's a hero who is completely shattered as he decides to switch off his previous life and start a new life. But it's true that the last one was from this piece of dialogue that I'm really attached to.
How was the reaction so far to the movie and the screenings?
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't have any screenings yet?
We didn't.
Okay.
We didn't have any screenings yet. This is the first interview I do actually about the film. I think you were one of the few people that saw the film.
Okay.
Because I think it's playing, and today it's Monday. It's playing the industry and market screenings. There was a screening on Saturday, but it's a market screening. There's a screening today. But the first public screening is tomorrow, so I had no idea.
Okay.
I'm very curious.
Well, then I wish for the best, and the audience will also like the movie a lot. And
thank you.
Thank you for the interview.
No, thank you for the questions.
You're
it's
welcome.
Good. It's a good warm-up.